Grace Morrison still remembered the exact moment her world changed forever inside that cold courtroom. One envelope carried the truth about 6 years of sacrifice, pain, sleepless nights, and unconditional love that had been completely ignored by the man she once trusted with her entire heart. The courtroom smelled like old wood and paper, while the bright fluorescent lights made everything feel even colder. Grace sat quietly with trembling hands while Brandon Pierce sat across from her in a designer suit, looking calm, confident, and completely untouched by guilt. Brandon no longer looked like the young man Grace had married in a tiny apartment years ago with nothing but dreams. His expensive watch, perfect haircut, and arrogant expression showed how money and success had transformed him into someone she barely recognized anymore. Sitting beside Grace was Maggie Collins, her childhood best friend, who had now become a successful lawyer with a fearless reputation. Maggie took Grace's case without charging a single dollar because she knew exactly how much Grace had sacrificed to build Brandon's future. Brandon's lawyer stood confidently before Judge Eleanor Henderson and began describing Brandon as a brilliant self-made surgeon who achieved success entirely through his own hard work and dedication. Every word sounded carefully rehearsed, as if Grace's years of struggle meant absolutely nothing in comparison. The lawyer dismissed Grace as nothing more than a cashier, waitress, and cleaning worker with no education, no professional career, and no meaningful contribution to Brandon's achievements. Grace felt her stomach twist painfully while Brandon silently nodded in agreement without showing even a trace of shame. Then came the final insult when the lawyer called Brandon generous for offering Grace a small monthly payment for only 2 years after the divorce. He claimed she had nothing valuable to offer, and that Brandon simply wanted to move forward with his successful new life. Please subscribe and share our channel, because we create emotional and unforgettable stories specially for viewers like you. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful stories filled with drama, lessons, and life-changing moments to every video we make. Maggie slowly stood up from her chair and calmly asked the judge for permission to present evidence that completely contradicted everything Brandon's lawyer had just said. The entire courtroom suddenly became silent as everyone turned their attention toward Grace and Maggie. Grace reached down to the bag beside her chair and carefully pulled out a large manila envelope filled with years of hidden truth. Her legs felt weak as she walked toward the judge's bench, while Brandon watched her with growing confusion and concern. Judge Henderson opened the envelope and carefully examined every document, while the entire courtroom watched her face in complete silence. Within seconds, her serious expression changed into shock before she suddenly laughed so hard that even the court staff looked confused. Brandon's confident smile instantly disappeared as his lawyer leaned toward him and whispered nervously into his ear. Veronica Ashford shifted uncomfortably in her chair because nobody expected the evidence inside that envelope to completely destroy Brandon's perfect image. Judge Henderson finally looked up and asked Brandon if he wanted to explain the signed promissory note in front of everyone. The document clearly proved that Grace had taken a huge personal loan to save Brandon's medical education years earlier. Brandon tried to dismiss it as an old personal agreement between husband and wife that no longer mattered anymore. But Judge Henderson immediately shut him down and reminded him that legal financial agreements always matter inside a courtroom. Maggie then presented years of bank statements showing Grace paid nearly every living expense, while Brandon focused only on his studies and career. The documents revealed 6 exhausting years of rent payments, tuition support, groceries, textbooks, and medical equipment purchased with Grace's hard-earned money. Judge Henderson continued reading old text messages where Brandon thanked Grace for sacrificing her education and promised to repay her one day. Every sentence completely contradicted the lies his lawyer had confidently spoken earlier in court about Grace contributing nothing meaningful. The entire courtroom became even more shocked when Maggie revealed Brandon secretly transferred $75,000 of marital funds into Veronica's business account. Brandon immediately defended himself by calling it an investment opportunity that would benefit his future financially. Judge Henderson coldly explained that using shared marital money for another woman without permission was financial betrayal and dishonesty. Brandon lowered his head while Veronica looked furious because their secret decisions were now exposed publicly for everyone to see. Judge Henderson slowly summarized Grace's sacrifices one by one while staring directly into Brandon's frightened eyes across the courtroom. She reminded him that Grace abandoned college, worked 3 difficult jobs, destroyed her health, and supported him completely during his journey towards success. Then the judge asked Brandon one painful question that made the courtroom completely silent for several long seconds afterward. She asked how a man could forget the woman who sacrificed her entire youth just to help him achieve his dreams. Brandon attempted to defend himself by claiming Grace only worked ordinary jobs while he completed the difficult medical training and surgeries. But before he could continue speaking, Judge Henderson slammed her gavel loudly and warned him to stop disrespecting Grace again. The judge explained that every successful person stands on sacrifices made by others who believed in them during difficult times. She made it clear that Grace's support and endless hard work helped build Brandon's career just as much as his education did. After reviewing all the evidence, Judge Henderson announced her final ruling while everyone inside the courtroom listened carefully without moving. Brandon's lawyer looked defeated because he already understood the decision would completely change the outcome of the entire divorce case. Grace was awarded repayment of the $45,000 loan along with years of accumulated interest from Brandon's unpaid debt. Judge Henderson declared that Brandon legally owed Grace compensation for every financial risk she carried to protect his future years earlier. The court also granted Grace half of all marital assets, including savings accounts, retirement funds, property investments, and shared financial holdings. Brandon's expression darkened because the fortune he believed belonged only to him would now be divided equally with Grace. Judge Henderson then ordered Brandon to pay monthly financial support because Grace sacrificed her own education and earning potential for his success. She explained that Grace deserved the opportunity to rebuild the future she gave up while supporting Brandon's medical career. Finally, the judge ordered Veronica's company to return the $75,000 Brandon secretly transferred during the marriage. Veronica looked completely humiliated because her involvement in the scandal was now officially recorded inside the courtroom documents forever. Brandon exploded with anger and shouted that Grace had only been a cashier who never attended medical school or performed surgeries herself. His emotional outburst immediately revealed the arrogance and selfishness Judge Henderson had already criticized throughout the hearing. Judge Henderson angrily reminded Brandon that Grace made his education possible by carrying responsibilities he never had to worry about personally. She declared that every hour Grace worked and every dream she sacrificed became part of Brandon's successful career story forever. The hearing finally ended with Brandon standing frozen in disbelief while Grace quietly tried to control her overwhelming emotions. Maggie hugged Grace tightly because after years of suffering and humiliation, justice had finally arrived exactly when she needed it most. Outside the courthouse, Brandon desperately tried convincing Veronica to stay and help him handle the disaster surrounding their exposed financial scandal. But Veronica angrily blamed him for lying about Grace and walked away without even looking back at him once. Brandon stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching Veronica disappear while reporters and strangers whispered about his public humiliation nearby. For the first time in years, he no longer looked powerful, respected, or untouchable behind his expensive clothes and success. Several months later, Grace returned to college and finally restarted the education she sacrificed years earlier for Brandon's future. Sitting inside a classroom again filled her heart with excitement, confidence, and hope she had not felt in a very long time. Grace studied harder than ever before because she finally understood the importance of building a future for herself instead of someone else. Her professors quickly noticed her determination, and she soon earned top grades during her very first semester back in school. Slowly, Grace rebuilt every broken part of her life, including her confidence, health, and emotional peace after years of exhaustion and heartbreak. She moved into a comfortable apartment, paid her debts, and finally learned how to care about her own happiness again. One afternoon, Grace walked past Metropolitan Elite Hospital and briefly stopped outside the large glass entrance where Brandon still worked every day. Surprisingly, she felt no anger, sadness, or regret anymore because she had already emotionally freed herself from the painful past. As Grace continued walking toward her new future, she realized the strongest relationship should never require someone to destroy themselves completely for love. She spent 6 years helping Brandon build his dream, but now she was finally building her own life with strength, peace, and self-worth.